reflected cross-site scripting with some SVG markup allowed. So they already tell you. So SVG is this vector graphics format. And it's a way of getting icons, basically like vector graphics for your icons. It's very, very compact, which is going to make your site more responsive. So SVGs are used prevalently in web applications. And so the idea is I might allow some of this markup. And if I have a cross-site scripting vulnerability, it can lead me to cross-site script execution. So one of the things that you'll do when you find a UI is to start spraying it with tags to see what might get reflected back. And so this is like doing the italics in your search engine. So here I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to use this tag, and I'm going to search for it. And when I search for this thing, you see, hey, this tag's not allowed. I can do something like try a different tag. So I'll do, let me try italics. And then I'll search for that. And then this tag is not allowed. Well, I don't want to sit here and type tags into this search engine box all day long. And so the first thing that we're going to have you do is to script the brute force searching of all the tags to make sure this web application has filtered every single one of them. So that's your first step. And PortSwigger gives you this nice cross-site scripting cheat sheet that says, hey, here are all the tags that you could use to see if all of them have been appropriately filtered. So that's what this is. And you can copy all these tags into a clipboard and then brute force the search and look for the response code to see if they've been filtered or not. Likewise, whenever you have a tag, these tags can have event handlers. Someone mentioned in the chat about doing an event when someone does a mouse over on something. Well, those are JavaScript event handlers that you can attach to any one of these HTML tags that will execute on like print after print on animation. All of these different event handlers for giving you this interactivity with the DOM based on what the user is doing in the DOM. So those are also, we're going to brute force those too. But the first thing we want to do is brute force the tags. So I'm going to copy all these tags into the clipboard. Well, actually, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to execute some code onto this site that is going to search for a particular tag. And then I want to print out the status code. I want to see what comes back when I submit a tag, because I want to programmatically test all of these tags. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a tag that's basically my name, and I'm going to search for it on the site. So I have to actually fill in the site here, which is what I'll do here. This is my site URL. So I'm going to copy and paste that into this, this program. And then I'm going to submit this tag, get the search, and then find the status code. And then I'm going to do the same thing with script. And these two things should result in, these two searches should both fail. So that's what I'm going to do next. So this gives you a 400, tag not allowed, and then the script, tag is not allowed. So the next thing I want to do is I want to brute force all of these tags that are in that cheat sheet. And so if I do this, if I go over here, copy this tag to the clipboard, and then go back into this program, say I am going to create a file and then just paste what I got here. Can I just do a Control V? No. I need to not copy. Huh. Maybe I need to put this in the shell. Paste this as plain text. No. I think my clipboard, let me copy, it's not happening here. Let me, I might have to just manually do the copy and paste. There we go. All right, so these are all the tags. I'll start with here. So I managed to get all of these tags in script tags.txt. And then if you go back to the console, and you or if you go back to the script tag file, so you see I have all these script tags, and then in my program I have this script tags.txt file. I want to brute force search this thing, and that's what this program snippet does. So I'm going to, in Python, open up this file, and then I'm going to create basically a list. This is a list comprehension in Python. I say for every line in this file, strip off the trailing carriage return, and then create a list out of every single tag that you get in this line. So this assumes that there's one tag per line for every line in this file. And then it's going to print all of the tags just to make sure that it works. And then for every tag in this list of tags, I'm going to search. And then based on the status code, if I get a 200, that means this tag is allowed. If it gives me a 400, which is going to be everything else, it's basically going to just print the tag out followed by a space. And so we'll see all of the tags at work are going to have this be printed out. So I'm going to run this. And so you see all of the tags we're going to test in a list. And then it's going to test these things one by one. And this is going pretty slow because I think Replit doesn't like me right now. I actually upgraded my Replit to be Pro so it could be faster. We're only going to wait to the very first one that actually works. So animate transform gives us status code 200. And then you're going to find that there's a whole bunch of, there's not a whole bunch, there's several other tags. There's actually the SVG tag is also allowed. And that's basically going to be the exploit. But part of the code lab has you figure out which ones of these are allowed. Okay, so that's the tag. I'm going to control C this because I don't have all day. This is not going fast enough for me to stick around and wait for. So now I have this attribute, I have this tag, the animate tag, animate transform tag. The next thing is I need JavaScript to execute. And typically you can I can't inject the JavaScript with the script tag because it's filtered. But one other way of executing JavaScript is to do it on an event handler associated with the tag. And so that's the next part. If I go back to this cheat sheet and I copy all the different events to the clipboard, hopefully this works. And I go to this file. And paste all of these attributes in there, I can do the exact same thing. I can basically write a program, which is down here. I know, so like the brute forcing of the tags, I'm going to brute force the event handlers. And so I'm going to get all these event handlers into a list. And then for every event handler in this list, I am going to use the tag that has been allowed, the animate transform tag, and then I'm going to associate it with a particular event handler and see if this makes it through. If I can get a 200 off of these, and if so, it's going to print success. Otherwise, it's going to keep on going. So let me run this. And then the output's over here. So on activate, on after print, that doesn't work. So we'll keep this going until it finds one. And as part of your code lab, I want you to find the ones. You'll run this to completion and then figure out what tags are actually allowed. I probably should have done this on my own server, but All right, so there's the success. It's on begin, gives you a code of 200. So then the last part is to actually solve this thing. So if you did this animate transform, and then you did the on begin alert 1, then you could potentially solve this thing. So, oh, but you also animate transform can only animate if you had an SVG. So you actually have to include the SVG and then animate the SVG. And then on the beginning of the animation, you would do the alert. So that's the payload. And then if you run this, it should, so that's the search results. So this should execute on the way back. And then if I have gotten lucky, I've solved the lab. Okay, so that's the reflected 3. But definitely do the other steps in that code lab to run the programs. Okay. So that is the end of that one. The next one I'm going to do is reflected number 7. And so this is basically reflected XSS into a JavaScript string with angle brackets and double quotes HTML encoded and single quotes escape. So here's an example where the web developer, the application developer is trying to do the right thing. It's trying to escape characters, trying to HTML encode characters. And this is one of the more advanced ones. You'll see these individual techniques being applied to be effective in the earlier ones. This is one of the later ones. So I'm going to access this lab and walk through the logic. And so the logic of this lab is very similar to the logic in all the other ones. So it's helpful to take a look at this. So this is your application. And it's got a search engine that's the search box is vulnerable to cross-site scripting, but you have to actually take a look to see how it, like what script is being executed that might be injectable. So that's the idea. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first search a search string. So I can just search my name maybe, and then take a look at what happens. And so you'll see that this search happens. And then it gets me this page, and this doesn't look like anything sort of interesting is happening, but I'll go through the network connections. And you see this is the original search. Oh boy. You see, this is the original search that I made, but then you can see there's a tracker here. This is a 1x1 pixel that has echoed the search term back into the results. So how did this request get generated? And for this, you'll need to look on the JavaScript page and you say, oh, I'm going to inspect this code. And that's what this is going to do. It's like, what is going on here? And so you can see this is the tracking image. Somehow that got generated and it's reflecting the search term back at you. So how did this script get generated? It turns out this is generated via this JavaScript, client-side JavaScript. And this client-side JavaScript has a JavaScript variable where it's set to the search term. And then what it does is based on the search term, it will do a document.write of the tracker image, and it will encode as a parameter to this access the search terms. And this is how the website can sort of keep track of what searches are being done on its site. And it's doing the right thing here. It's trying to URI encode this thing so that this image source doesn't like break. Okay. And then, so this is the JavaScript code that will then produce this image, right? So this is the thing that you're like, maybe I can just input crazy characters and see what happens on the output. So that's what I'm going to do, input some crazy characters. So the first thing is maybe I'll input my name and tags, and then see what happens. And so this gets generated, and then if you look at this script, you see this thing got HTML encoded. So it's like, oh wow, that prevents me from breaking out of this image source, right? Because I was trying to inject tags to try and break out of this image source, and the tag got HTML encoded. So that doesn't work. That injection didn't work. And it's doing the right thing. It's actually doing the encoding and the URL. So after it does the HTML encoding to make sure those brackets aren't there, it's doing URL encoding. So you're like, oh, this is not vulnerable. This doesn't look vulnerable, at least. So then you try something, maybe the double quotes. Can I escape out of the double quotes of this image source and do something? So that's what I'm going to do next. I'll send it the double quotes and see how it handles that. And if you look, the double quote is also HTML encoded. So it's the search terms have it HTML encoded, and then when it comes down here, you can't inject the double quotes into this image source either. So dang, the double quotes don't work. What about single quotes? Can I break out of the JavaScript itself? Like if I put a single quote in here, maybe I can end the string in this search term and inject JavaScript inside of here. So I've kind of given up injecting into this thing because the double quotes and the greater than and the less than seems like those things are HTML encoded. And that's like when you look at the terminology of these levels, they're telling you what the level is doing to protect itself. And so the HTML encoding is making it so I can't really inject into this thing that's being produced. So this is not the right sink to target because the source that I have, the search term, is being HTML encoded to prevent this from being a sink. Now what I want to do is to see whether or not this can be the sink, right? This is JavaScript executing up here. So there's another way. So there's two ways to get code execution. We're going to try, this failed, so I'm going to try to, let's try and break this JavaScript. How did this JavaScript get instantiated with the search term? So I'm going to send in a single quote and see what happens to that thing. So that's the single quote. I'm going to search. And it's going to come back. And if you look, in order to inject the search, the single quotes into this payload, you see it's \escape, because that's the way you escape the single quote in JavaScript, is to \, it, right? Because you want it to treat that single tick as an actual character, not as the ending of the thing. So it's \ escaped, and that's part of the level name. So you're like, oh, what about the \, right? Is the \ also escaped? Because it needs to be so because the \ is escaping out of the context, if you want to actually inject a literal \, you have to \ that. Because if your string has a \ in it, you can't just use a \ to, the \ is your escape thing. So that's the next thing I'm going to do. I'm gonna inject the \, and I wish I knew how to use developer tools better, but oh well. I'm gonna inject the \ now around my name, and I'm gonna search for that and see what happens. Sorry. And you can see here the \ is not escaped. It actually injects it directly, right? And moreover, when you do this, you're \ escaping that quote in this JavaScript. And so if you look, there's an error in here. So what is this error? This is generating a syntax error because there's an invalid or unexpected token here. What has happened is that you have eliminated this single quote from terminating this string. And so now there isn't basically it's going to take this single quote and it's giving you a parsing error. It's an unexpected token. So what you've done by injecting a \ at the end of this string, what you've done is gotten rid of this last quote and broken yourself out. Okay, so that's your way in, as it turns out. Moreover, if you go into the network, you see that search term with the \, you see that it did not generate the tracking GIF, right? because if the tracking, if this JavaScript is broken, and you can see there is no tracking GIF underneath here because this thing gives you a syntax error on the JavaScript. So you have effectively broken syntax on this JavaScript thing. Now what you need to do is break syntax and generate an alert. But one of the things is you want to be able to fix this syntax after you've broken it. So what I'm going to do next is do this. I'm going to do a backslash, and then I'm going to inject the single quote so that the last quote is parsed. So I can try and end the statement. So if I do a backslash, and you can't see this. So here I'm going to do a backslash single quote and then followed by a semicolon to see if I can actually terminate that JavaScript statement so that I can generate a GIF that has a blank payload. So that's what I'm going to try and do next. So I'm going to search for this, and you'll see this will actually fail. And so this is the result. You see this here in the console. In the console, if I could get the console back, you can see that backslash single quote will end this string, and then the semicolon will end this statement. But then I still have a single quote and a semicolon here, and that will give me this syntax error. So that's where this error comes from, because this is not valid. This is not a valid JavaScript statement after it, the single quote semicolon. But what I can do is I can actually comment out this single quote and semicolon, right? The comment character in JavaScript is the // So let's try that. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to take this thing. I'm going to do the backslash and the single quote to end that string. I'm going to give the semicolon, and then I'm going to give the // 2 forward slashes. Sorry, this is a total eye chart. Let me Control-Shift+. Oh well. But this is a backslash single quote semicolon / twice. So I'm going to search on that. And then if I go back to the network console, which is here, you will see that tracker GIF actually happens, right? And then if you go to the JavaScript, you see how this JavaScript, you have finished off this search term. This ends the statement, and you've used the comment characters to remove the trailing single quote and semicolon. So now you're good, right? Like after this semicolon, I can now do an alert. And that's going to solve the level. And so remember, this is the kind of iteration that you'll probably end up doing whenever you have something that looks like this. So backslash single quote semicolon, then I can do the alert 1. And then I need the 2 forward slashes to comment out that single quote and the semicolon. And then this should actually give me the actual alert. And so that gives me the alert. And then that should solve the level. Okay, so that's reflected number 7.